Hello there, people of the internet. I'm doing a little video series where I talk about the cons of particular rifles, just because I've shown off all these rifles on the channel multiple times and I've talked about how great they are and how much I enjoy them. I figured I'd take a step back and talk about some things that I dislike about some of these rifles. They all definitely have their pros, they all definitely have their cons. Some of their cons are kind of shared. A lot of that has to do with the time period that they came out at. So let's go ahead and dive right into it today. I'm talking about the Carcano. A lot of people have a lot of negative things to say about this rifle, but it's not nearly as bad of a rifle as a lot of people take it out to be. So, Carcano, today we're going to be talking about specifically the 6.5 variants, meaning 6.5 Carcano versus the 7.35 Carcano. And the reason why we're doing that is because 7.35 Carcano rifles are significantly more rare than 6.5 Carcano rifles, and the ammunition for them is basically unobtainable. So we're going to go ahead and just kind of leave that off the table. Maybe I'll cover that in a later video, but we're going to be talking about 6.5 Carcano rifles. Not particular this model, just all of your various Carcano rifles that are out there. There's a tremendous amount of them. Some of them are long rifles, some of them are short carbines. They all basically share the same issues that we're going to be talking about here. Okay, so first things first. Internal magazine. In this particular case, you need an in-block clip to be able to feed it. Huge con of the Carcano. Unlike something like a Mauser where you can single load the rounds if you don't have a clip for the rifle, and you just have the ammunition, you can single load the rounds and have a full magazine, versus something like this, if you don't have that in-block clip for the rifle, then you basically just have a single shot rifle. That's definitely one of the big cons of the system. Now, since it requires that clip, we got this huge hole on the bottom of the magazine well where the clip can fall out once you're out of ammunition, and that allows any kind of mud, dirt, debris, whatever it is that you are witnessing at whatever it is you're at, that allows a lot of different stuff to be able to get into the action and gunk it up. So huge con of the Carcano is the feeding system. Now, whenever this rifle was designed in, I think, the 1890s, potentially the late 1880s, the technology that they had then, like this right here, was just one of the proven systems that was around during that time period that was shown to function well enough. And, I mean, you just kind of had to go with what it is that people knew during that time period. 100 years from now, we're going to be thinking, oh yeah, the AR platform. Like right now, we think that's cutting edge, absolute greatest technology, but, down the road, that might be the equivalency of like a single shot cap and ball musket to us. So, Mannlicher style in-block clip feeding system, huge con of the Carcano. It's also a manually operated system, meaning every time you fire the rifle, you have to cycle the bolt. And that's really not that big of a deal, depending on the situation that we're talking about here. But the Carcano bolt has one big drawback, and that is this piece right here. This piece can actually rotate and uncock the rifle, and I have had this happen before on, actually while I was using it on my YouTube channel. This piece right here can actually rotate. It's attached to the cocking piece, and if it rotates, you can't close the bolt. You got to recock that thing back and re-rotate it back into place. So you definitely risk your firearm having malfunctions, especially if you are running it quickly, and that's just a con of the design. So it definitely has its issues. I don't like the Mannlicher style feeding system, and I don't like not only with it being bolt action, but the style of bolt action. And if you run it quickly, you do risk having those issues with the bolt. So that's two major cons right there. Third one, as I've said before on every other video that I've made in the video series so far, you can't really mount optics or accessories to this thing without significant modifications. If you want to drill and tap the receiver, or if you want to sporterize it and throw in a different stock that has like M-LOK or Picatinny or some sort of rail system on it to where you can mount accessories to it, by all means, go ahead and do that if you have your gun that you want to do whatever it is that you're doing with it. However, that being said, that is no longer a Carcano. That is more or less a modern rifle that has a Carcano's action inside of it. So, that right there, definitely a big con. Another huge con is the sights on these things. These sights, they're just notorious for shooting overly high. People tell me that the sights, whenever they are, like, you take the front sight and you stick it to the very bottom of your rear sight right here, and that should zero it out for 200 yards, according to what people tell me. However, it still shoots overwhelmingly high, like several feet high, even at, 100 yards, which should only be a couple inches high if it's a 200-yard zero. So these right here, these rifles, they don't shoot at point of aim at all. I have had Carcanos that shoot at point of aim, and I've had Carcanos that like shoot stupidly high or stupidly left or right, or like there's just so much variation whenever it comes to the sighting systems on these rifles that you just have to learn your individual rifle and where to aim it. And then if you go to another Carcano and you try aiming it the same way you tried aiming your first Carcano that you got used to, then it might not hit at that particular point of impact. Like there is, from what I could tell, there's no rhyme or reason for the points of impacts of these rifles. Like this one right here hits probably about 4 feet high at about 50 yards, which is ridiculous. And then I got one of those pointy Carcanos, one of the ones that has the bayonet attached to it, the cavalry models. I got one of those that has a straight bolt handle inside of it. And that particular one hits right at point of aim at 50 yards, like dead on at point of aim at 50 yards. So the sights are definitely 110% one of the big cons about the rifle. All right, next up, ammunition. There's basically no surplus out there on the market anymore for 6.5 Carcano, and the stuff that is out there is overwhelmingly unreliable. I don't really know why 6.5 Carcano is just like basically all of your surplus Carcano ammo is just completely unreliable, and I don't know if that has to do with storage conditions or what the situation is. So your only real option is modern-made ammunition. And the modern-made ammunition can be a little bit difficult to find. There are companies out there that are making modern-made 6.5 Carcano, and there's some starting to pop up since we're getting a lot of 6.5 Carcano rifles on the civilian market right now, and the demand for ammunition is going up. But the demand for other types of ammunition like 9mm and 223 and 308 and things like that are significantly higher than 6.5 Carcano. So why invest the time and effort and whatnot into making 6.5 Carcano? Why invest the components into making this when you could put those components into something like 223, 5.56, 9mm, 308, things that you know for a fact are going to sell? So that's one of the big issues why there's such a supply and demand issue with this round, simply because there are other cartridges out there that have more of a demand. Now, that being said, your modern-made ammo, a good portion of it is going to be made with 2.64 diameter bullets, and the Carcano is made with a 2.68 diameter bore. So you are going to suffer a little bit of velocity loss and a little bit of accuracy loss simply because the bullet is smaller than what it is that is actually intended. And that is because like 95% of your 6.5 rounds out there on the market are made with a 2.64 diameter bullet. This is like the only one that uses a 2.68 diameter bore. So just because of like logistical reasons and logistical purposes, there's no real significant reason to tool up to make a completely different bullet just for your 6.5 Carcano rounds. You may as well just use what is already out there on the market. So if you can find the ammo, it's the wrong size. I mean, you could load your own with proper sized bullets, but once you start getting into hand loading, you start looking at a bunch of different factors whenever it comes to ammunition. You start changing, you could start changing the pressures that you're using, your points of impact. You can do all sorts of little tweaks and whatnot to try and get as much accuracy out of your rifle as possible. Hand loading is just its own ball game in general. So those are my 5 things that I don't like about the Carcano. That being said, this right here is probably my favorite rifle. Like out of all of my military surplus rifles, this right here, 6.5 Carcano, it's just such a lightweight, handy little carbine, light recoil, light retort. Like, I've brought this out to the gun range plenty of times and let people shoot it, and they're like, man, this thing feels like I'm shooting a 223, and I'm like, yeah, but it's a 6.5 round. That 6.5 Carcano cartridge, that's a 140 grain bullet, I think, traveling at about 2,400 or so feet per second. That's definitely not a slouch by any stretch of the imagination. It's not a full power rifle cartridge. It's certainly no 30-06. But something like this, something powerful like this, out of a lightweight little carbine like what I have right here, it's just a really, really good setup. And I think, like I said, this right here could be classified as my favorite cartridge and rifle. So thanks for watching, folks. Appreciate your time. Like, subscribe, share. Description below has a link to all sorts of stuff. Go check it out. You guys go off, have yourself a fantastic day. I'll see you guys on the next episode.
Been a little while since I've done this. Bonnie and Clyde be damned. Poor man's Garen. It's a shame that bolt-action shotguns aren't more mainstream.